Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting for the Hammonton Joint Land Use Board for Wednesday, February 1st, 2023 to order. This meeting was advance notice of the meeting was properly posted on the bulletin board reserved for such notices on the first floor of Town Hall and mailed to 2 newspapers pursuant to law. To the rear of the council chambers is a diagram of the location of the fire exits. Please familiarize yourself with the diagram in the event of an emergency so you can exit the building safely. All cell phones are to be silenced while in council chambers, and there's to be no smoking at any place in Town Hall. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Olivo,
Here.
Councilman Willerman,
Here.
Councilman Oliva, Gordon Faribault,
Here.
Mickey Palia,
Here.
Ray Schipione,
Here.
Michael Messina,
Here.
Michael Hozick,
Here.
Ralph Capaccio,
Here.
Bill Brinkerhoff, Jonathan Bask, Chris Kalani,
Here.
and James Mitra.
For approval of the minutes for January 18th, the only thing I want to add to that is that if we could possibly list the people who actually voted for the motions as opposed to all in favor. In here for the variances, we have that all were in favor, and it says who were abstained that weren't present for the case. And then the second motion, we have to add those names to that they didn't vote for the second motion either, because it says that they were all in favor, but I'm pretty sure they didn't vote for the motion. So if we could do that. With that, does anybody else have anything to correct with the minutes? Can I have a motion to accept the minutes with the change?
So moved. I'll second.
All right, well, it was, all right.
Got to speak up.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
No, not you. Him. He's got to speak up.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I don't have any correspondence to bring up, just that, you know, I hope we all can participate in every part of these meetings the best we could. Whether we're going to be voting on them or not, I think it's all important. We all want your input. No one is insignificant, okay? Moving forward, there are no planning board issues for tonight. We do have a zoning board issue, have to do with the Eagle Theater, application 6-20. Applicant seeks approval to construct a 2,000 square foot accessory storage building in support of the principal structure on Lot 1 and the Eagle Theater on adjacent Lot 2 in Hammonton's in-town zoning district. Improvements to the existing single-family residence structure used for storage, administrative offices, and dormitory space for the Eagle Theater are also proposed. Could the applicant come forward, please?
Mr. Chairman,
I'm recusing myself.
since this is a D variance and it's applicable to the total governing body, I will be recusing myself.
Okay.
Chairman, only the zoning board would be voting on this, so that would be 7. They'll need a maximum vote of 5.
Okay.
Capacity. And Mr. Polia has also a conflict, so we will be into the reserves.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I have to recuse. I own a property within the district in the 200-foot radius of the Eagle Theater. So,
Okay, thank you, sir.
sorry.
Okay.
Shelley, if you could identify who will be voting,
Yes, sir.
who will not be voting, I guess.
You can take that down further if you want.
Councilman Olivo will vote.
I'm sorry.
Chairman.
There's only 7 of us.
That's why I didn't make her mad.
Okay,
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we're good.
we're good. So we could proceed ahead?
Yes, yes.
Uh, Would you like to swear in Mr. Donio, please?
Mr. Donio, if you raise your right hand, you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
could you please tell us what you would like to do, please?
Yeah, first say good evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out tonight. We have an application, as Mr. Oliva, the chair, said, involving the Eagle Theater and a support building immediately adjacent to it. We have tonight Mr. Donio, who's the chairman of the board, Jim Donio, and was he sworn?
He was.
Would you swear? Thank you. He'll be the only witness tonight, so with no further ado, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mr. Donio, this project that we're here for tonight, can you give a basic overview, before we get into specifics of the project, of the general structure of that, I'm going to call it a campus, involving the theater and adjacent buildings and lot?
Sure, and just with the echo of Brian's sentiments, thank you all for your time tonight. We appreciate it, you fitting us into the schedule tonight. So I'm here on behalf of the Eagle Theater. I'm the chairman of the board. I'm one of the co-founders of the theater, and I'm a volunteer, unpaid volunteer from the founding, which was back in '07, and we reopened the historic theater in 2009. So you'll note the theater itself, right, which is recognizable right on Vine Street. That's located here. Adjacent to it, we meaning the theater, the nonprofit charity, owns also adjacent to it a portion of the parking lot, and then directly adjacent to that is the municipal lot, and we have an easement there, an access easement, kind of adjoining that. Next to that is a house, a historic house that was built originally in 1875. We've done our best to acquire that house with some state grants and used some state and federal grants and some loans from the state as well to acquire and also to start the restoration process, which the state was encouraging us to do. This is a 3-story home. At one point when we acquired it, it had 5 residential units in it, 5 separate apartments. One was in the basement. I can say that was the first thing we did when we went to close on the property, was gut that and remove that. That was not a to code residential unit. So we immediately gutted that. So the basement is basically, it's empty. We don't even really store anything down there. This first floor and second floor and third floor all contained separate apartments when we acquired it. And again, we started to then remove those separate apartments and turn it into one unit back to what it originally was, which originally when it was built, it was constructed as one single family house, one large single family house. So current use, first floor is offices for the Eagle Theater. Our offices and workshop used to be on West End Avenue prior to this, and that is where we sold it to Blue Rascal Distillery so that we can encourage our craft beverage industry to grow here in town. And our goal was hopefully to use some of those funds to be able to get all of our facilities located adjacent to each other. Brian referred to it as a campus.
And why is that important to have that consolidation?
So efficiency more than anything, right? So we had great donors and great local businesses that would support us, like Alan Riches and others, who would assist us as needed with budget trucks and things of that nature. But it was very cumbersome, costly overall to try to shuttle things back and forth, like set pieces, props. So we're a nonprofit professional equity theater, and what that means is we produce all of our own shows from the ground up. And so we'll have actors from South Jersey, but from Philly, from New York, from all over the country that'll come and join us. But the productions themselves, we have to build all those sets from scratch and then store all those set pieces, props, and things of that nature. So the efficiency of having everything located in one spot with we're a small nonprofit, and very small staff, relatively speaking. So being able to keep everything efficient and keep costs down by keeping everything, and labor down by keeping everything contained, adds to the efficiency.
So
First floor is office right now for a couple. We have
how many employees do you have?
two to
typically?
three at any one time. Of course, it's we're coming out of
Where
COVID.
do they park their vehicles?
Currently, either in the rear or quite often here in our parking lot, adjacent to the theater, or along Second Street, South Second Street, right over here. There's street parking as well, and then also occasionally over here in other lots that are privately owned but accessible to the public.
Is it fair to say there's significant parking both off-street and in parking lots, whether it's the Eagle Theaters or the ones you described across the street, within close proximity?
Yes, I would say, for sure, both for our staff, for the actors, and also for the guests.
If the proposed storage workshop building is approved,
And
will
that's in
those
the
spots
zone.
still be available? The parking spots that you referenced?
Theoretically, sure, they
There's
could.
no need to come in and out of the building.
Correct, yeah. If there's no need to come in and out of the building, or all of the doors, which there really would rarely be a need to come in and out of all of the doors, then yes, I would say that would be perfectly acceptable. We're not anticipating truck traffic and things of that nature, loading and
How
unloading.
many spots are shown on that plan that would be available as part of the storage building?
I would say easily there could be, 6 to 7 comfortably, possibly more. And that's outside of the garage, of course, right? I mean, theoretically,
Correct.
vehicles could be stored in the garage. We don't anticipate that, though.
Correct. What is the purpose of you coming here to seek construction of this building? What is it that will accomplish for the Eagle?
Yeah, so just to finish up, second and third floor currently
Oh, sorry.
is housing. And by housing, I mean, we consolidated, we removed, it was costly, but it was important. We removed all the separate gas meters, electric meters, brought everything up to code, fire code as well, and made sure that everything was up to standard with one dwelling unit. And I call it one dwelling unit. We can refer to it however we want. There's really nothing per se that kind of fits this exact use. But basically, we don't rent, the Eagle Theater does not rent the space as far as rent it out. We're not able to do that, nor would we do that. It's used as bedrooms that when our actors come in from out of state or from different parts of the country, other guests of the theater that are aligned with it or contractors, that they stay there during their run. So for example, it might be 3 or 4 weeks of rehearsal and maybe 3 or 4 weeks of the run of a production, and we might have 1 or 2, either a stage manager or a couple actors that may stay there during that
So it's a
run.
big house at this point in time.
It's a fairly substantial house. It was built right. The builder, I love history of the town, right? Builder owned a lumber yard back in 1875 in Hammonton, and that was his estate. That was his, big house that he built, and he built it very well. Needed a lot of work because it was chopped up over the years, and we've tried to preserve as much of it as we could. Yeah. So currently on the second and third floor, we have just strictly. We removed a lot of the extra kitchens, of course, because they're not needed, and we just separated it back out again, opened it up, I should say, into one. On the second and third floor, we reopened the historic staircase that was still there, that was covered up, and brought the second and third floor up to code, and have a couple of bathrooms and a few bedrooms,
So
and a kitchen.
So the board has some concept of the commitment of Eagle and the funding that you receive from all sources. Approximately how much has been invested in the revitalization of that property?
So in state, federal funds and donations, somewhere in the area of, currently, before this, including all the soft costs leading up to this for the construction of the garage, plus the restoration of the house and the acquisition of the house, somewhere in the area of about $650,000 so far, I'd say.
Gotcha. Back to my question, what is it you want to accomplish if the board approves the building that we're talking about in the rear?
What's the goal of the building? Yeah, so the goal of the building is pretty straightforward. It's currently, well, when we had a workshop space on West End Avenue, which we sold partly to acquire this and move forward here, we're basically just looking to now construct this to replace what we had on, and that was 5,000 square feet on West End. We were at one point up the street. We had a donor who donated a piece of property to us that we recently sold as well, now that we have everything contiguous here. And that was going to potentially be a workshop or space like that. Now that we've acquired all this and moved forward through the pandemic, the goal would be to, once we got Pineland's approval, now seek our final approval here to construct this for storage for our raw materials, right? Lumber and raw materials, our set pieces that we are able to reuse, they call flats basically, so things that we can reuse to try and save costs, and then also props and equipment and other things we may need. And then beyond that, of course, we also are very involved. The Eagle Theater, of course, produces shows, but we also are very immersed in the community, right? So for example, the New Year's Eve Bash and Blueberry Drop, we help co-produce that with Main Street and the town. So for example, the giant blueberry does have to be stored somewhere.
How big is that blueberry?
We did build a brand new one this year, big, beautiful, brand new one that we're very proud of. We worked with Main Street and the town on that. It does need to be stored somewhere. The town doesn't really have facilities, neither does Main Street. So our hope and our goal is, if we can get this approved, had very kind neighbors on Vine Street who were, let us store it there. We have a local farmer who's letting us store it there temporarily. But our goal here would be to have it, store it downtown, And it's 10 to 11 feet around. I mean, it's a very large item, and we're trying to not take it apart in between. So when we look at things like the giant blueberry for New Year's Eve, that has to be stored somewhere. There are festivals, events, things that we participate with. For example, the Food Truck Festival, we don't run the Food Truck Festival, Main Street does, but the Eagle runs the beer and beverage garden along with the music there. So there are things that are needed, right? Just facilities that are needed for staging, for equipment, tents and so on, to run those events, right? So we having easy access to the downtown for that is essential. Things like the Fringe Festival, which is a 3-day festival that'll be coming back this year, also needs a lot of production as well.
Is it fair to say that most of the activities you just described are in closer proximity to this proposed facility than when you were on West End?
Yeah, there's no question. In fact, it's much more manageable. It eliminates the need for trucks and extra labor to move all that equipment, and also in inclement weather, it allows us, right, to quickly and easily set up or break down, and gives us an extra spot for safety.
Based on the plans that Mr. Lowey, the local architect, prepared for you, on a day-by-day basis, focusing now on its relationship with the theater, how would that work, transferring pieces from one place to the other, and how will the proximity help in that regard?
That's a great question. So if you could kind of envision, right, this is that workshop, garage area, if you will, right? And our goal would be that we would construct this and then have some area, some space in here to actually, sure, we'll use some of it for storage, both for festival items and also for raw materials and props, but then we'll also use a good portion of this to actually build the sets, right? And so the goal would be, when we used to build them off-site, whether it was on West End Avenue at our workshop or at the Makerspace, the old Morano's out by Weymouth Road, they were kind enough to let us use some space there in the interim. When we used to do it there, we would have to break it all down, get it onto trucks, and then load it in, like a concert would do, right? Or a major production that was maybe touring around the country. It's very costly, very tough to do, even just for a few blocks. It doesn't seem like that big a deal, but we'd have to build them, and then break them all down, and then build them all again. Very costly, very time consuming. What we do now is we'd build it probably in this area, that's what we're envisioning, and then we'd have an overhead here where no vehicles would go through, but we would hand them then into the side of the stage here. This is our stage area right here. So that's kind of why it's designed this way. We'd hand them right into the stage with hopefully down the road, a sliding door or rolling door here, which would then provide access onto the stage, and then we wouldn't have to disassemble and reassemble multiple times. Same thing for load out. It'll allow us more flexibility to be able to do more one-night only events or one weekend only events, because we can kind of move off any items that we need to and move back on. That's kind of been a big limiting factor for the Eagle to do even more productions there. Currently, we build a lot of what we do right here in the rear of this building. There's an old warehouse portion, and what we'd like to do is repurpose that, because kind of our footprint here at the Eagle is kind of maxed out. So we'd repurpose some of this more finished space down the road if we're able to, so that then we can use this for construction.
So this, if I may, the building that you're proposing is directly behind the house.
Correct, yes.
Is that behind? Is the house that's on is there houses on Second Street that you'll be building behind?
This is the theater house and office. This is the proposed garage. This is the adjacent neighbor. This is if that's what you're asking. Yep.
Okay.
So to the rear, there's only one neighbor directly behind, and I say it's behind to the side, however you want to look at it. That's here, and I don't want to provide testimony, but the neighbor actually said, anecdotally she mentioned on site that she would appreciate that this would help block the snow again, because she realized when there was a garage which we did have to demo because it was a public safety hazard. It was collapsing when we acquired it. That helped block the snow around this corner. Believe it or not, that snow and wind kind of comes right down here and kind of lands all on her porch. So I know it's a little anecdotal. I don't think it's going to necessarily help. I told her that, but she was just in general kind of happy. And she's seen what's going on here with this property, which was a bit of a troubled property before we acquired it, right? It had some issues in it, and I'll probably leave it at that. I have some great before pictures that down the road probably I should share with everyone, but they were not ideal living conditions, and not any living conditions that I think any of us would really want in our community. So we've uplifted that greatly.
Can you, for the record, describe the general, whether it's residential, commercial, the block right outside the door there, actually? But what's in that block?
It's primarily a mixed use of, I mean, commercial, office, and residential on Vine Street. I mean, you're all fairly familiar with Vine Street. We're here right now. It's in the, in this same block as Town Hall. So clearly it's meant for commercial. This particular block is meant for commercial and office, and historically had a mix of residential and other mixed uses.
Again, for the record, just so we acknowledge it, one of the obligations is to provide a lot grading plan, and we are, Mr. Chairman, willing post-closing as a condition, if there is approval, to provide that post-closing. We understand that. There's also a question about lighting. The lighting needs to be controlled so that it doesn't escape the four corners of the property. Does that present a problem?
Yeah, we're very mindful, right? So I'm not an artist. I have no theatrical background. I come to the table with managerial background and ability to help make projects like this happen. But I will say our team and all of us involved at the Eagle, our board, our volunteers, and our staff and others are all very mindful of aesthetics, right? And the funding we've received so far for this property was really because the state and the additional funding we were just awarded recently, which is another $150,000 grant from the State Council on the Arts and the Cultural Trust for the funding of this garage. That grant was awarded because they like the aesthetics of what we're doing in the neighborhood, right? And that's led to more funding for the town because they've seen that we turn these projects into reality, and then that opens up additional funding down the road. So yes, aesthetically, I could tell you we do not want any light to bleed off the property, and we are mindful of the landscaping as well and the aesthetics. It matters, right? So our goal for the Eagle, and is I've been involved as a volunteer with, also unpaid volunteer with the Main Street organization for many, many years, for almost 30 years now. And I will tell you that personally, I'm very mindful of the downtown and the whole town and its aesthetics, and making sure that we continue to uplift it, right? So this, we think, will be a major benefit to that.
I think you described earlier in our private conversation about the Council on the Arts recognizing the uniqueness of all the functions, housing, construction, performance, parking. How rare is that for the benefit of the board?
It's very rare to have what's called an equity theater anywhere outside of a major city or I'm going to say a tourist area or a very well-funded area. How about I put it that way? We are an anomaly across the country. It's very rare to have that. An equity theater just means it's the same actors you might see on Broadway, right? That could be acting here or in national tours across the country. While they're not all equity actors, some of them are not professional, but want to kind of go down that path, and we open up opportunities for them. We also offer children's programming, workshops, and also summer camps and camps actually in our conservatory throughout the year. But to Brian's point, Mr. Howell, what I think he's mentioning is that the idea, the uniqueness, not just of what we produce and how we do it, but where we're doing it in a non-traditional environment, right, in Hammonton, but also that to have everything all in one spot in a campus-like setting is very rare. There are a few examples. They're in really very, they're very well-known theaters around the country. There are a handful of them, but most don't have everything on one site. They're kind of scattered around, right? Where it might be somebody who maybe was a big fan of a theater in, in a suburb of Chicago, let's say, right? And maybe when they passed away, they didn't have any heirs, and they might have donated their house to a theater, right? And then that house became housing for actors. So it might be like several blocks away. There might be a workshop or a garage with the same thing. The idea of having everything in one spot has been our ultimate goal of the Eagle from really when we were founded. And we worked very well and hard with our neighbor here, who also owns, he actually lives right behind us and has become a big fan of the theater. He and his wife worked really closely with us to make sure we were able to acquire it when a lot of other people did want to acquire that, to continue to probably carve it up into maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 units instead of uplifting it to, as we have done. So I would say the uniqueness is, while we're not the only one in the country to have a campus-like setting, we're one of the only ones, certainly I would argue probably one of the only ones of our size, for sure.
It was noted in one of the reports, the planner's report, about windows and doors. And really, I don't know if I'm accurate in saying there are no windows per se. And what's the reason for that? Why?
Well, let me say that there may be. We may consider some, especially this elevation here. If you kind of look, if you look back between the buildings right now, between the Eagle and the house, and you were to look, there's a space. It's several feet. If you look back there, there is a prospect that we may consider some design feature here to try to make it feel like less of a garage, because we're mindful of that, right? We have a historic 1875 house. We have a historic 1914 theater. and we're trying to be mindful of that as we continue to upgrade their facades and their exteriors. We are mindful of that, and we may consider something here. These doors will probably, I would say, I anticipate them being upgraded and having more of a aesthetic than just a traditional garage door. I mean, I would assume that that's probably what will go, all dependent on, obviously, on pricing and availability, but we are very mindful that these are the major design features here, these doors, and potentially here. This wall here, if that's what you're speaking of, which would be the only one that's visible and it's only by this neighbor, we would probably envision heavy landscaping there. I don't know that we go with arborvitae, but things of that nature, something that would last and soften up that wall a bit. I could envision that there and working with the neighbor here. This wall is just adjacent to the theater, so I don't anticipate really any landscaping per se there.
Thank you. The height of the building, which one of the variances we're asking for tonight, why is the building the height that it is? And is it going to be one story?
Yes, it's anticipated, and as designed now, it's anticipated that it will be one story, and that's to allow for larger set pieces, right, to be lifted up and brought out through large overhead doors. That's the goal, and also just as we have larger set pieces that we're storing, obviously, that would need to be stored in a way that would allow for access, but also to not obstruct all the floor space. So that's what we're envisioning. We're not envisioning a mezzanine or a storage area up above, if you will, story and a half or second story per se, at least at this time. We're not envisioning that, and we're not anticipating that. That would not be our primary goal. It wouldn't necessarily be accessible, so we wouldn't really probably focus on that at this time.
Is it also fair to say that you do not anticipate any residential occupancy of the storage building?
No, we have absolutely no plans or intention, and if we were to ever, I would say, if that were to ever happen, and I absolutely do not anticipate that occurring, we have more than enough capacity at this time here within the 1875 house. If we did, we would certainly circle back around at that point. But no, we have no plans and no intention of anything like that. It would be storage, and then, of course, construction of sets within the borders of the building.
How about from a noise standpoint when you mentioned the construction?
Yeah.
Is this going to improve what you've been doing so far?
I would say it would. I don't know how many people ever ride by and see some folks back here in the rear of this parking lot, but occasionally, especially because now without our other workshop, this is a very small space back here that we work in, because our dressing rooms and our stage are kind of here, dressing rooms here. So this is the only space we really work with behind our wine lounge. So sometimes we do have to creep outside, right, especially on nice days, to try to be able to do everything we're trying to do. It's very challenging. We've also been off-site, sometimes in other towns, as needed in other workshops, depending on the type of production that we're building. So yes, this would, it's my belief and opinion and testimony that this should limit, I will never say eliminate completely, but limit drastically, and certainly any noise, and also drastically improve the situation, if anything.
I don't know that you said it, but the plan would be the construction would take place within the proposed building.
We do not anticipate building outside of the walls of the building. Yeah, we don't anticipate that. There would really be, there would really be no reason we can come up with why we would ever have to do that, right? Because if we have space under roof that, keeps the inclement weather out, there's no logical reason why someone would want to be outside. We can't anticipate anything like that.
I have nothing further for this
What
witness.
type of construction, what kind of building are you building? Is this like a pole barn kind of a building?
So I don't know that I would describe it necessarily as a pole barn. I would describe it as a garage. I don't know if there's an elevation included in your packets, and I apologize if
I
there
didn't
isn't.
see anything that shows
No
what you were
elevations, yeah.
constructing.
So two things. I want to answer your question directly, Mr. Chairman. But first, maybe I should mention, first and foremost, we may, in fact, and I do want to share this because I think it's important, depending on costs, right? Because it's kind of all over the place. Lumber was up 14% last week. So we're kind of mindful of timing this correctly after the approvals. So we may, and also just for sheer capacity's sake, we may build this in 2 phases. If you could kind of see, it's designed almost that it could be built in 2 phases. It wouldn't be ideal, but if we have to, we're willing to, and the state's aware of that with the grant funding they provided, that within knowing how crazy commodity prices have been in building materials and labor, they're mindful of that. So that's first. That's something that we should have shared earlier. And the second thing is the type of building. It would be more indicative. It was designed by Lolio Architects, who obviously has an appreciation for the downtown with his offices here. So by Bob Lolio. and we appreciate all his help with this. He was mindful of the preservation of this front historic 1875 house, and while we're not kind of mimicking that, I wouldn't say in the back, because we kind of don't want to fake an old garage, but we are mindful of that and picking up on some detail. Our goal is to pick up on some detail, so it wouldn't give a feel of like a pole barn per se. No, that would not be our goal in the
I would
downtown.
hope not.
That would not be our goal in the downtown. I don't know that it would look, it certainly would be nowhere near the size or scale of the building that's adjacent to us on the other side of the parking lot, Mr. Shank's, Shank Uniform. It would be nowhere near that size or scale, so I think it's probably important that we note this, right, is in the rear and kind of tucked out of the way, hidden by this house, and this other large warehouse, right, or large garage structure is over in here that's not owned by us, and that is like, I would say at least 3+ times, at least 3+ times the size. Sure, yeah, we could use that. I don't know if this helps much, but this isn't like in detail, but it is a rough sketch of, it has an A, an A here. This might be the first section we build, depending on what the costs come in at. And as I said, we'd add some additional, you see some decorative lights, we'd add some probably additional decoration to the, or light glass to the doors, potentially. There's a potential for that, or at least some extra decoration to give a little extra, break up this monotony. And then there's another A that goes this way that kind of opens up on this other side. Does that help a little bit? Yep.
Will that be an insulated building?
Good question, and that actually is something that we are weighing out with, once we know whether we're approved or not and at what scale and so on, then we'll go out. We had some early preliminary estimates for structures to get our grant funding, but again, they're mindful that's a sliding scale at this point. So we'd hope that it would be insulated, to answer your question. That would be our goal, would be to insulate it and at least put heat, some sort of heat blower or something in there. That would be our hope and our goal. But again, all dependent. We probably build it in a way that we could always add it if we did run short on funds for this round. Or
More for heat, but also for, you were talking about sound.
oh, for sound, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I would say our intention is to have it, to answer as honestly as I can, our intention is to have it insulated and put a heat blower in there, which would definitely help a bit with sound as well. That's a good point. We weren't planning on soundproofing it though or anything like that. We do have some of the soundproofing in the Eagle itself, which is why the neighbors don't really hear us when we're, when we have full bands or full or musicians. So, does that answer your question fully? Okay, Mr. Chairman, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. The only other question was, and you may have answered me, and I apologize. It's going to be directly behind the house.
Yeah, if you'll notice, it's about, I don't know, I apologize.
Well, I'm just saying, is it wider than the house is as the footprint? Would it be wider than the
It's
the old
slightly
houses?
wider in one section right in here.
Okay.
Right? So we are not connecting the buildings, the theater, to this space. Look, down the road, would I love to see that happen? Sure, but we're not doing that
But
at this
not
time.
extending towards Second Street, so to speak.
No, if you'll notice,
About
this is
22 feet off of Second Street.
Okay.
this is the edge of the rear of the 1875 house right now, and this is actually intentionally designed to line up with that. It bumps out a little bit here so that we can construct this A and not have one large pole barn feeling building, and then it juts in just another few feet.
And then the parking will be on the Second Street side.
Parking, any parking we use, and again, we're not, it's not as though we're.
Well, it's just parking for,
Exactly.
Right.
If there is any parking used here, and I could kind of envision it here probably, it would be in this area, where we already park now.
well, if somebody's coming and doing construction and,
Exactly. They may very well park here, or if someone were to back in a pickup truck or something like
Correct.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Or a small, like
Yeah.
a little box truck or something. Pardon me? No, this is not meant for long-term, parking, this is geared toward the public, like guests and people like that, and then over here, the other parking that we all use kind of downtown is also where a lot of our guests do. The only other folks that may park back here, depending on, would be actors that might stay, but a lot of those actors come, they come by train, or they come by Uber or whatever, and when they're here, they're either riding bikes or walking, because everything's accessible downtown. They actually like that, so. A lot of them don't, if they're coming from New York or a major city, they don't have cars. So some of them do, right, depending on where they're coming from, but all of them don't. A lot of them don't.
Jim, did you look into connecting the building?
So I'm happy you brought that up. I wasn't going to necessarily go too deep into it. Great question, Mr. Scipione. So we would down the road potentially consider it. Look, obviously, I'm not going to stand here and testify that we wouldn't love to have it connected. It would be lovely, but this is to fire code, and we're mindful of that, right? Because
okay.
for fire suppression, right? So if we were to ever get to that point, if we were to seek additional grant funding, and there are grants, we're eligible for a lot of grants now because of our national awareness of the Eagle and a lot of the funders and foundations that exist, and they're very mindful of what we do here. So if we can then go back to them after this is approved and say, you know, if we could only get some fire suppression funding, then we can potentially come back to the board and connect. That would be something we would consider down the road, but we wouldn't open up that can of worms now. And this is to code, and actually, if you'll note, it kind of, the way it juts is intentionally within that code to make sure that we are both for building code and also for fire code, you know, proper.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
How many bedrooms are in there? Where's your occupant?
Great question, Mr. Faribault, and that is on the 1875 building on the second floor. Currently, we only really have one functioning bedroom. That being said, we have the capabilities of going to going to 3 total there, right? We're just not using the other ones right now. They were kind of carved up, so we just don't use that section. So ultimately, our goal would be currently 1, but our goal would be 3. With one to 2 functioning bathrooms, 1 right now, and we may not add on, but get the other one properly functioning again. The 3rd floor has no bathrooms and 2 bedrooms, and those we do currently use. That is all the code that's been inspected by your town officials already as well, and the fire code official.
Any other questions? No other questions?
That's my only witness.
Need your only witness? Mr. Engineer.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have one quick question. You mentioned that you, in the future, anticipate like heating, right? What about other utilities? Like, do you have water or sewer? Do you need that at all?
That's a great question, Mr. Herman. And so, how can I put this? Water and sewer isn't mandatory for this to work because we have access right here, right? It's very close. However, would it be nice to have a shop sink and a mop sink? Sure, right? Because we'll keep the building better that way, and a hose bib to at least hose things down. That would be ideal. So we'd love to have that ability. We haven't priced all that out yet. So our goal would be to at least get it set up for that, even if we don't get it fully functioning, so we don't have to break anything back up down the road. Our goal would be at least to have, I'm going to say, a mop sink, utility sink, hose bib, that sort of thing, and maybe some drains. But beyond that, nothing that would affect. We don't need a full restroom in there to answer, if that hopefully answers some of your
This
questions.
is more for.
Yes, gas and electric for sure, of course.
yeah.
We're not sure how that'll have to be fed yet with the service. Our main service comes into the theater from the rear, and then we trenched it underground back there. So we're just not sure yet how Atlantic City Electric will make us do that. And South Jersey Gas for if we do put in, and we're anticipating putting in some type of heating system or blower, something basic to take the chill out. We don't know that just yet, what will be required.
Okay.
Does that answer,
Absolutely.
okay, sure.
It's more for this.
Great question, and one that we're, we'd love to do all of it. I mean, I'd love to put air conditioning in there too, but we're mindful of costs too within our grant budget.
Thank you.
Yep,
So
thank
on
you.
our letter that was dated January 20th or 30th, 2023, the engineering comments start on page 14, and as Mr. Howe said, they're obligated to come back to the zoning office with a lot grading plan, which our office will review. And many of my comments here just more or less are identifying information that we'll need as we move forward. If you want to go through section 5, item C, we are requesting that the grading plan just confirm that the sidewalk and access have an are ADA compliant with no issues there, or if so, we can address modification at the time. Letter E. EN pertains to, on the plan, we reference a swale around the back and the side of the property. Just when the lot grading plan is submitted, we'll need more information to make sure that we have positive drainage, we're not trapping water or impacting neighbors. Even though you are the neighbor, we still want to make sure that we're addressing the drainage, and the roof leaders are directed to the front or the swale, just to make sure that water is getting out to the street as best as it can. We do have a lot grading checklist as part of our application, which gives a lot of this information as well. And then yes, on letter G, which is, again, that this just pertains to the improvements that you're proposing that are not shown on the plan that you submitted, but can be deferred to the lot grading or, lot grading plan is, make sure that we see the driveway construction type, thickness, reinforcement, that kind of stuff, your curb, your restoration of the roadway, things like that. As long as the details are included in the lot grading plan, to give us enough information to review and approve that.
And
That's
Mr.
all
Herman,
we ask.
Mr. Herman, I apologize for interrupting, but just to clarify too, just on that front, we're not anticipating, this is all ramped already. This is all
Yeah,
driveway
it looks-
already.
it
But
looks
for the
great.
board's sake, I wanted to make sure that was all redone when South Second Street
Yeah.
was redone. So, and that was always, well, I say always, that was, for as long as can be remembered, that was ramped because this was a garage in this
Yeah.
area.
And I just know from experience, even recent experience on the same street we're on, during construction, as you drive over those aprons, they get cracked, they get broken. So as they get replaced, we and I'm sure it will be done. This is put on the record. So that concludes my comments. Most of, again, what I would look for is defer to a submission of a lot grading plan. So with that, I would give it back to you. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for him? Stuart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Herman said, our report is dated January 30th, 2023. We have been working diligently over a long period of time with the applicant to identify issues and try to resolve the ones we could before we got here. As you said, sir, earlier, this property is located in the DT1 or the in-town zoning district. That's part of our form-based code, so there are some regulations that would not be applicable elsewhere in the town that are applicable here. If you move to page 6 of our report, that starts really the meat of it. We have identified the need for a D1 use variance because office uses are not permitted in the DT1 zone, and storage uses are not addressed in the DT1 regulations. So because of that, anything that's not affirmatively permitted in the zone is prohibited. So those are D1 variances for those two elements. We also have a section in our ordinance that says only one use per lot. So we have multiple uses here. We have the office, we have the residential piece, and the storage piece. So that's a second D variance for multiple principal uses on a single lot. Moving along, next page. The garage is essentially an accessory structure to both the Eagle Theater and arguably for the office. In this zone, the accessory structures have to be smaller than the principal structure. The garage is larger, as you can see here, and the stats aren't listed there, but the garage is larger than the principal structure, so a C variance is required for that. Next page, a maximum lot coverage is permitted at 50%. They're at 58.6%, so that's a variance. Principal structure building footprint, maximum permitted is 1,500 square foot. They're at 1,575, so a variance is required for that. Those are both Cs. The next page, the accessory structure, the footprint, again, not larger than the, I do have the stats here. Footprint and not larger than the principal structure. The principal structure is 1,815 square feet. The garage is 2,000. For maximum building height for an accessory structure is half the permitted building height of the principal building. That's 12 feet. Their eave plate is at 16 feet, and the roof is at 24, so those are both C variances. We had asked for testimony for a number of residents. I think we heard that. We had asked for conversation and testimony about the use of the public parking lot across the street, and we've heard about that. Starting on page 10 are a number, page 11, are a number of design variants. As the garage is designed now, there are no windows. Mr. Donio said that they're looking at perhaps in the future, but as of right now, there's a design waiver requirement for windows on the side elevation. There is a requirement that every street-facing ground-level business and residents have a separate entry. We don't really have that here, so there is a design waiver for the placement, for the an entrance door placement requirement for the storage building. It's proposed to be on the left side of the new structure. Next page. In downtown zones, at least 50% of the building's front facade must be located along the front setback line. Here, as Mr. Donio said, we're set back 22 feet. So that is a design waiver. Next page, we talked about residents. We talked about location of entrance and accessory structures, so that is taken care of. Page 14, there is a requirement that mechanical parking and loading be landscaped and screened. Here, that's not really possible to do, so that's a waiver. Mr. Herman went through all of the engineering comments, so that's really all we have.
Okay. Gentlemen, any questions?
I just have one question. Do you have a plan on putting air conditioning in there?
Yeah, so I apologize if I didn't speak up loud enough. Heat, we're definitely anticipating. Air would be, I mean, just dependent upon availability of, of funds, right? If our grant funds can be stretched enough, or in the future we can do it, I think what we'll probably do is plan for a lot of these things and at least make sure we don't have to undo much to make it happen, but we're gonna try and do it, as I said, in phases within our budget, right, with the grant.
Well, my only concern would be that if you had an air conditioner that was on the same side as the resident, you have a huge air conditioner running all the time that could disrupt the enjoyment of your neighbor. Yeah,
That
right
it would
there.
be over here, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate that it would be there. I would probably anticipate that it's probably gonna be between the two buildings.
You mind putting that in the stipulation that you can never put an air
Yeah,
conditioner
that's,
over there?
yeah, I don't,
Disrupt the enjoyment of your
yeah, I don't
neighbor?
foresee, Brian, there's no issue with that, yeah.
No,
No,
no.
we don't have an issue with that at
No
all.
objection.
I couldn't possibly find it likely that we would do that to Ms. Quinn, who's behind, I wouldn't ever anticipate that. So, yeah, I mean, we're perfectly fine to say it wouldn't be on the, we referring to that as the rear of the property, I guess, technically?
Well, we've kind of defined it as though the frontage is on Second
How
Street for that building.
I just want to make sure we define it correctly, right? So,
So it
Where's
would
the
not be on the
is the
easterly.
north arrow on that drawing? It might be tucked around the side.
That's like the easterly side or the northeasterly side?
It's the side opposite Vine Street.
There you go.
on the, how about on the property line that abuts the, we could get that block and lot, right? Can we memorialize that maybe so that we know, so not along that property line, but as I said, more than likely it'll probably be in this area, and probably not here where the garage door is, but probably in that area. Mechanical, I think in general would be there. We have one, it's not a big unit, but we have, I think, one or two right here right now on the side of the theater already.
You also have your sway up, goes in, it would be, if you put a sway up between the two properties, any type of pad.
Yep.
For a AC or P flow, so you're,
We're
yeah,
at,
you're probably gonna be here anyway.
we're anticipating hopefully a small swale and and a little bit of landscaping back in that area. But that's a great question, Mr. Furlow. Thank you. The other thing, I know I reiterated it, but I just want to hit it one more time, and that is, if there are no additional questions, but this was the existing garage. There was an existing garage here. We did demo it because it was a safety hazard. So we are really just, I mean, we're replacing a garage. It is larger. I'm not going to dispute that. It is definitely larger. But there was historically a garage here. It appears as though probably since this 1875 house was built. Some sort of structure back here. And again, this is, more than double that size, but beyond that, it did exist there. And that's again why that driveway exists through the whole rest of the property.
I know there's a lot of variances that you had mentioned that are required, but then there's also a few things that you said maybe you're not sure depending on funding. How do we get around that? Are we asking for too many variances in this situation?
No, I don't think we're asking for too many variances. I think Mr. Donio uprightly has said what they may plan to do as funding moves forward. And I don't see, again, in the theory where we're talking right now, that any of them would trigger the need for additional relief. If it did, then they would have to come back. But I don't see, from what we heard this evening, I don't see that being an issue. They wouldn't be changing the location of the building, the size of the building. The setbacks would remain the same. There may be some changes to the building elevations, but that would not be a variance situation. Actually, that would relieve the need for some of the design waivers, but we're not there right now.
Yeah, because even when you turn around, you're talking, I'm sorry, when you're talking about, you may put windows, you may not put windows, and then there's a thing in here that requires windows.
Yeah, we're asking for waivers from those, and as Mr. Weiser said, if we do anything, we're going to pull back from the need for those waivers. It'll be post-approval, presumably.
We're trying to be extra conservative and extra cautious, and that's why we went with, I'm going to say, everything in the kitchen sink, meaning that we wanted to make sure it was crystal clear that whatever we do there, we are permitted to do, right? And we've been approved to do it. I would say it's fairly likely that a lot of these things, especially on the design waivers, are going to be resolved as we get into the costing now, right? Because, again, when we first costed this out, it was in the peak of the pandemic when numbers were such that we would never have been able to afford even, a quarter of this building. Now, things are a little bit different. We're hoping we could hit the timing of that just right. We also, as I said, just were awarded another grant, so that helps as well.
So, Mr. Donio, just, if I may, just for the record.
Sure.
If anything increases the height of the building, increases the size of the building, the location of the building, impacts any of the setbacks, impacts any of the coverage, you would agree that you would come back?
If the question is if it makes any of those things larger, then yes.
Correct.
If it makes any of them smaller, which I will tell you, there's a likelihood, once Pineland's approved it at 2,000 square feet, I mean, we're coming in for the full 2,000 square feet. Are we going to build 2,000 square feet immediately on day one? I can't necessarily say. It's all dependent upon price. But once Pineland's approved it would kind of be foolish of us to not come in. We wouldn't be doing our charity's work to its fullest by not asking for the full approval. We're mindful of the aesthetics, like I said from the start, but we are also mindful that Pinelands did approve us, and we were quite happy about that. I think they looked at the whole context as a campus. It's something that hopefully in the future maybe we could consider in our town in certain zones, campus-style zoning, right? Because we do have some of that. It's not zoned anywhere like that, but we have examples, whether Stockton or a university ever expands, right? Whether a medical complex expands, or an arts complex like this, or a performing arts complex. We should be mindful of that. That's separate and aside from tonight's conversation, but something that I would probably, maybe at some point in the future, this board or others could consider as campus-style zoning.
And I'm sure the last thing you're going to want to do is put something up that's not going to look aesthetically pleasing to that area.
I would say that everything for the last 30 years of my life as a volunteer in this town has been focused on making sure we continue to improve the quality of life here.
I can agree with that.
Windows would inhibit what you really need to do in there, because you can't store props and stuff against windows.
Yeah, if we had some windows here, and the architect did at one point, and I apologize again if it's not in your packet, there was something aesthetically pleasing that was here. It was an interesting design element here. that had a fairly substantial window, which I thought was a really unique and interesting design, and not one we had come up with, but we liked. And again, lights, and when I say lights, windows, right, on the garage doors. Those are all things we could do. I wouldn't anticipate, again, certainly nothing here. I just don't think that would be really helpful to anybody. It's overlooking the side wall of the theater that also has no windows, right?
Yeah.
And here, I don't know that our neighbor really wants them. That's something that we anticipate. We like to be good neighbors. We talk all the time with our neighbors, and we want to make sure we have a good conversation here that's within the purview, within our approvals for Pinelands and for the board here tonight, but also is mindful of our neighbor. So if she would like some additional things, and we can do it within our budget and also within the approvals, then we're going to consider it, right? We'd like to have that ability. And as I said, anecdotally, not under, what was passed along by the neighbor is they've seen what we've already done over all these years, and they're very happy, and they want to see more improvements like this. They know we won't do something to be detrimental to the neighborhood.
Any other questions?
So once you get started, you may not even need some of the variances that you'll get tonight. Like, for example, the windows, if you decide to.
There is a likelihood that is possible, but again.
Right, you just want to cover yourself.
Until we know Pinelands has approved it at this level, in this
Right.
way, we'd like to move forward in that way. And also, it may be, as I said, it could be two-phased. We may just build this one section and then come back and build this. It really is dependent upon.
It's likely, Mr.
finances.
Scipione, that they need the variances. They will always need those
Oh, okay.
variances. It's the design waivers that I think will
That's
fall
it.
away
Okay.
as the design proceeds.
Something
Thank
else
you.
that maybe is, and I apologize, I know I should probably stop, but this is, I think, important as well, and that is to the point of that campus feel, right? These two properties are separate lots, so that, because we bought them at different times, so they haven't been consolidated or anything. So I think it's important to know that whether that would or would not down the road impact us in any way, we can't say. But what I can say is today, some of what we're discussing here may or may not have been impacted for some of the variances.
And we had asked in the very, very beginning of this, ages ago, whether they could consolidate the lots, and because of the way the funding worked, they were not able to do that.
It's both are owned by the Eagle Theater Inc., which is our nonprofit charity, right? But they can't it's the way the funding's listed. So for now, we can't. Down the road, as new funding opens up, or as some zero-interest loans that we have tail off, then we would consider that, right? But we also couldn't open that can of worms because we have federal funding through the United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, believe it or not, for the Eagle, and then state funding through the Department of Community Affairs. I mean, we get a lot of different funding from a lot of different agencies. So we have to be mindful of their bureaucracies too, right? And we're very aware of that. They love this project, but they also are within, they have constraints as well.
Well, I have to open it up to the public, although I don't see anyone in the public. Does anybody want to come forward? Seeing that, I'll close that. Turn to my solicitor.
Chairman, it is time for a motion, and I hate to repeat a lot of this stuff, but I'll do it so it's clear on the record. The applicant is seeking or needs two D variances. The first D variance is a variance allowing the office space and storage, which is not permitted in this particular zone. The second variance is allowing for multiple uses, office space and residential, where only one is allowed. So we'll need two D variances. Also, we'll need C variances. I'll identify each of them. The accessory structure is larger than the principal building. That will need a C variance. The lot 1 maximum lot coverage is 50%. Proposed is 58.6, so it's 8.6% greater. The maximum building footprint of 1,500 square feet is required. It's proposed at 1,575, so an additional 75 square feet. The footprint should be no larger than the principal structure, which was 1,815 square feet, 1,815. The proposed accessory structure is 2,000. The maximum building height, and this is the final C variance, required 50% maximum height of the principal building, which is 12 feet. The plate proposed is 16.1 and the roof ridge is 24. There are a number of design waivers that are set forth in the
ARH report on page 15. Stuart's gone through them. That they're under section E on that page. And then would be part of the motion is all other conditions and requirements set forth in the ARH report would be a condition of this approval. And finally, the separate condition we approved is that was suggests is that the air conditioning unit would not be placed, if necessary at some point in time, would never be placed on the, and I'll call it the Quinn property. Is that the property on Quinn?
Yep, Quinn.
I'll get the lot and block and put it in specifically so it's identified, but the air conditioning unit would not be placed on that side. So a long-winded way is, could I have a motion to?
Now, could that be in one motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll
You
make
wanna
that
make a
motion.
motion
I'll
as
make that
stated?
motion based on everything our fair
You
solicitor
don't want to repeat everything?
just mentioned. No, I forgot the first thing he said,
Mr. Scipione?
so.
I'm sorry, who seconded? Mr. Messina? Any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Gordon Faribault,
Yes.
Ray Scipione,
Yes.
Michael Messina,
Yes.
Ralph Capaccio,
Yes.
Chris Kalani,
Yes.
James Matro,
Yes.
and Chairman Olivo.
Yes, the motion carried.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shelley.
There are no other resolutions. We already opened to the public. There's nobody in the thing. Could I have a motion to close the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Gordon Faribault, seconded.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Good night, sir.